The embalmer's secret and the lie of history. Imagine the scene. Fixed in time by the flickering light of history, a royal embalmer in a vast, silent stone chamber. The air, thick with the scent of natron and frankincense, hangs over the marble slab where the pharaoh's consort lies. But the orders for her preservation for her journey to the afterlife defy every sacred rite known to the priesthood. This horrifying contradiction is the true face of ancient Egypt, a civilization where extreme, often brutal, practices were masked by religious authority. We revere the pyramids, the golden splendor of the tombs, and the majesty of the Nile, but that's the sanitized history. The truth involves practices so confronting that Victorian archaeologists literally censored the evidence, locking away explicit artifacts and burning papyri that documented ritualistic abuse and systematic social control. We are about to tear down the veil maintained by 2 millennia of secrecy and modern shame. Cosmic control, the pharaoh's performance and Matt's edge in the Egyptian worldview. Spanning over 3 millennia, sexual energy was not just personal, it was the engine of the cosmos. Every intimate act was a potential religious ritual, vital to maintaining the divine concept of order, truth, and cosmic balance. The pharaoh, as the living Horus, was the central pillar of His vitality, his cosmic potency, was directly linked to the fertility of the Nile and the success of the harvest. If the Nile failed to flood, if the crops withered, it was interpreted as a failure of the pharaoh's divine performance, a catastrophic cosmic imbalance. This pressure justified a system of increasingly extreme and public displays, pushing the elite to blur the lines entirely between worship, duty, and absolute political power. The stakes were nothing less than averting a societal collapse into isfit chaos. This extreme ideological framework justified every subsequent act of ritualistic control and abuse. The 1925 lab discovery and the ritual of transformation. The historical cover-up began to unravel in the 1920s, using newly available X-ray and medical analysis techniques. Researchers examining a young royal mummy made a shocking discovery. It wasn't simple damage, but surgically precise modification performed post-mortem. This was not a punitive act. It was a ritualistic alteration, a hidden step in the process of creating the eternal body. Subsequent analyses of other royal and high-ranking noble remains revealed a consistent pattern, evidence of intentional alteration or removal of specific parts, sometimes with the use of foreign materials for enhancement. This points to a secret, specialized ritual conducted only for the highest echelons of society. The doctrine of perfection, the Kinum cult, and eternal function. Mummification was far more than preservation. It was the creation of a divine entity, a suitable vessel for the Ka and Ba to achieve eternal life, Ak. The modifications discovered were likely rooted in the extreme end of Egyptian eschatology, the beliefs about death and the afterlife. These acts may have been tied to specialized cults, particularly those dedicated to the potter god Kumen, who fashioned human bodies. The alteration of the body was seen as the final necessary act of divine craftsmanship, ensuring the body was an absolute, flawless entity in the next world, capable of serving the gods and maintaining eternal power without earthly limitations. It was an attempt to transcend human frailty and ensure eternal potency through ritualistic surgery. The secret chambers of the dead, architecture of concealment, adding to the mystery. Certain tombs and temple substructures reveal specialized chambers that seem to have been designed specifically for these private, extreme rituals. These rooms often featured atypical drainage or ventilation, suggesting prolonged, non-standard procedures. Architectural clues point to areas accessible only by the highest-ranking embalming priests, physically separating the standard mummification process from the ritual of ultimate perfection. This architectural evidence confirms that these practices were not random acts, but an integrated, deeply concealed component of elite funeral rites. the systemic cover-up, and academic denial. When 19th century archaeologists encountered this evidence, they imposed a moral blackout. Eminent scholars, including some of the most respected names in the field, systematically removed artifacts, edited explicit descriptions out of official reports, and even confessed to destroying papyri and statuary they deemed too obscene. This was not simple negligence. It was an attempt to protect the perceived nobility of a high civilization from its own brutal truths. This academic censorship created a historical void, resulting in a sanitized, dishonest image of Egypt that persists in many museums and textbooks to this day. The sexual hierarchy and the doctrine of religious property. The strict Egyptian social order utilized sexual control as a primary tool of domination, while pharaohs and priests used ritual intimacy to demonstrate power. At the opposite end of the hierarchy were domestic slaves, and most disturbingly, children. The practice of dedicating young children, sometimes as young as 6 or 7, to temple service by elite families, was an accepted religious act. This dedication was a doctrine of religious property, legally and morally stripping the child of ownership over their own body. They were systematically trained, often brutally, in complex sexual techniques. The temple as a megacorporation, the hidden revenue. Egyptian temples were not just centers of worship. They were financial powerhouses, megacorporations that controlled massive land, resources, and human capital. The gift or purchase of children for temple service became a chilling, hidden revenue stream. These children, deemed instruments of the gods, were used to satisfy powerful patrons, secular and religious, who paid premium prices for access. The priests maintained this systematic exploitation by teaching that the service was the highest, most blessed form of worship. The archaeological evidence, including contracts and financial records from the Ptolemaic period, clearly demonstrates the profitability and scale of this industry, which was sustained through the systematic dehumanization of the vulnerable under the guise of piety, contradiction in law, property rights versus bodily autonomy. The horror is magnified when contrasted with Egypt's legal code. Egyptian law was surprisingly advanced in many ways, affording both men and women, including women of lower status, the right to own property, enter contracts, and sue. Yet, this legal modernity did not extend to bodily autonomy for slaves and dedicated children. The legal ability to control one's wealth stood in stark, devastating contrast to the religious and economic system that treated certain groups' bodies as marketable, transferable assets, highlighting the deep, hypocritical moral schism at the heart of the civilization. The psychological scars, dissociation, and trauma. Beyond the physical injuries documented in the medical papyri, the psychological damage was catastrophic. The children were systematically taught to dissociate, to view their bodies as separate from their identity, a coping mechanism essential for enduring the sustained abuse. Survivors who lived into adulthood carried profound trauma, often resulting in an inability to form normal attachments, or tragically, dying young from what ancient texts vaguely referred to as broken hearts. This legacy of trauma permeated Egyptian society, leaving a mark that defied easy erasure by subsequent conquerors. The Feast of Drunkenness, a systemic pressure valve. The climax of this extreme religious system was the annual Feast of Drunkenness, dedicated to Hathor, grounded in the myth of Sekhmet, whose bloodlust was quenched by the beer and ochre trick. The festival required every participant to achieve a state of divine possession through massive alcohol consumption, often laced with psychoactive lotus extracts. This state provided a temporary, ritualistic absolution from all social and legal accountability. The resulting week-long anarchy, marked by public group sexual acts and sanctioned violence, was a carefully controlled state mechanism. By allowing the population to release their frustrations, resentments, and sexual energies, the pharaohs ensured the stability of their rigid social hierarchy for the remaining 51 weeks of the year. The cultic architecture, chambers of chaos. Excavations at specific temple sites, particularly those dedicated to Hathor and Sekhmet, have uncovered specialized chambers beneath the main sanctuary. These rooms are distinct from typical worship halls. They are often large, accessible by multiple corridors, and bear evidence of extreme use, including residue consistent with mass consumption of fermented substances. These chambers of chaos suggest a deliberate architectural designed to facilitate the festival's anarchy while maintaining a measure of ritual containment, physically separating the sacred core of the temple from the week-long pandemonium. Foreign horror and the inevitability of conflict. The festival was a source of international embarrassment and fear. Foreign envoys, particularly those from Mesopotamia and the Near East, were openly horrified. Diplomatic records show that many kingdoms refused to send ambassadors to Egypt during the festival periods, fearing for their safety and moral contamination. This external reaction solidified the Egyptian elite's sense of unique, divine mission, further justifying their extreme practices as necessary for cosmic balance, regardless of international opinion, and setting the stage for the inevitable cultural conflict with more rationalist powers. The Greco-Roman Cultural War and the secret cults. The decline began with the arrival of Greek and Roman rationalism. The Ptolemies, though rulers of Egypt, were deeply uncomfortable with the unchecked chaos and public sexuality of the festivals. Cleopatra's reforms attempted to tame the festival, triggering a religious crisis where priests blamed every military defeat or crop failure on this foreign interference. The final blow came with the Roman conquest. In 30 BCE, Augustus Caesar ordered a brutal purge. Explicit artwork was destroyed, religious texts were burned, and priests were executed. The Romans didn't just suppress the practices, they aimed to systematically erase the memory of their existence. This cultural trauma led to the formation of numerous underground cults and secret societies that defiantly carried on the ancient, forbidden rites in hidden chambers, ensuring that the legacy of these extreme practices persisted long after the empire fell. Conclusion: confronting the historical shadow. The fragments of truth we have uncovered, the evidence of surgical ritual on royal bodies, the temple-funded industry of child exploitation, the architectural containment of chaos, and the systematic suppression of evidence force us to revise our entire understanding of this great civilization. This history shows that genius and depravity are not mutually exclusive. It proves how easily deep religious devotion can become twisted into a tool for social, economic, and political control. It is a vital, chilling cautionary tale about the dark side of absolute power and the lengths to which societies will go to maintain a perceived cosmic order. The secrets hidden beneath the sands are not just relics. They are a mirror reflecting the deepest, most uncomfortable contradictions of the human spirit. Final call to action. We've only scratched the surface of history's great lies. If this uncensored look into ancient Egypt has fundamentally challenged your view of the past, join us as we continue to peel back the layers of history's greatest cover-ups. Like this video, share your thoughts below, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the historical shadows.